He's going into the bag of doom.
Alright, so
No wonder he's late.
Going to the bag of extinction.
hey, we're gonna the next 3 days, we're gonna work on our last performance task of the trimester. And then there's two more after that. So yeah, good night. This one is maybe a combination of Bruno and no, there's less work involved, I think. I know. There's 3 ways that you're going to get information. One of them you already have, okay, is the solar system infographic that I'll hand back to you tomorrow. One of them is going to be like a 12-minute video that we watched today. Neil deGrasse Tyson gets around with a bunch of other old dudes, and they argue about Pluto. Like, that's what they do. Like, that's their lives.
It sounds like you're really bad friend.
I don't know. So it all comes down. So Neil deGrasse Tyson, we've seen videos of him before, and to say, hey, I think that Pluto is not a real planet, and he got like people weren't happy with that. So he and other scientists still to this day, even though it changed like 10 years ago, they still argue about whether it's a planet or not. I've seen some articles where people are like, hey, let's just get rid of planets and dwarf planets. All the planets will be planets, and then we'll put them into different categories. Some people, like, this is what they do. Like, while we're interested in other things, some people are super interested in what Pluto is. And like, good, everybody needs a
Oh,
thing
yeah, we get to argue about
that they're excited about. Okay? So we're going to do this in a couple of different ways. On Canvas, we're going to work on this today, tomorrow, and Thursday. All right? Which means you have to be engaged while we are in class. You have to work while we are in class. I will not accept this late. Okay, we are working on it in class on Thursday. After Thursday at the end of the day, unless we have a conversation, it will be late, and it will close Monday, and I will not reopen it. Okay?
Oh,
we have to work in class. We have to get stuff done. And I just want to see if we're capable of doing it, right? So, what we're going to end up doing is you're going to make a decision not based on what other people are saying, because it changes sometimes, but you're going to say, this is what I would classify Pluto as. And if you don't want to work on it, or if you don't want to agree with, like right now they say, all right, it's a dwarf planet, and here's why. If you back up your evidence with, to say, hey, I think it's a planet, and here's why, and the people who say that it's a dwarf planet, I sort of disagree with them, that's okay too. Like, you're not going to be penalized for if you think that the evidence supports that it's a planet, okay? So there's 2 different ways that I'm going to let you take notes on this video. You can either do it on a sheet of paper, right? Or you can open up the document that you're going to end up using, and you can type on it while the video clip is going. However, I am nervous that people are just going to sit on their Chromebooks while the movie is playing and then not have watched it. Are you trustworthy or no? Okay. For me, it's easier for me to, I don't like writing things down. It takes me a long time. I'm a much faster typer. So this is called the Pluto file. And here's something that I want to think about. So we did 5 different groups. We did inner planets, outer planets, dwarf planets. We did some comets. We did some asteroid belt stuff, Kuiper belt stuff, all of that. If we didn't have anything except for telescopes, we talked the other day, which things would we not know about? Probably Uranus, sure. Thank you for that. Nothing brings out the inner 7-year-old like talking about Uranus.
Cole made that up.
What would we not
Make it
know?
up.
All we have is telescopes. What would we still know about, do you think? All this stuff we have information about. We would probably still have information about Earth. There's a pretty good chance of that, because we probably still live here.
Well, of course.
What else? We wouldn't know what stuff was made up of. We wouldn't have sent anything to collect samples of atmospheres, of actual, like, rocks, right? We wouldn't have pictures or satellite flybys of any of these outer planets. Part of what they think is, right, and we just sent something past Pluto, like in the last 2 years. And for a really long time, Pluto was considered a planet, and then we started learning a couple of more things, and we changed our minds. There might be more dwarf planets out there. They might, later down the road, say, hey, we're going to change the criteria. This is actually a planet again. Who knows? They just can't make their minds up. Or not all idiots. Just,
Well,
yeah.
Pluto's not an asteroid, so
But it's a
And that's
dwarf
exactly
planet.
what we're going to look at, right?
it's not an
Now,
asteroid.
the facts of it aren't going to change, but if you think, like, hey, there's these certain criteria, this is which of them Pluto meets and which of them doesn't. If you think that the one that it doesn't is bogus, and you say, well, 2 of 3 is the majority, so I think that it should be a planet, you can make a case for that. But they're going to, almost everything that you're going to see is going to talk about why they think that it's not.
Partially because of the orbit.
So we're gonna look at some of that stuff. Here's what makes a good argument. All right? And I'm not talking about science. I'm talking about, and here's what it comes down to. How many of you have had conversations with other people and they're so close-minded that they basically just scream, I'm ignorant? Yes, we all have had those conversations, right? That's part of the reason why I can only spend a certain amount of time at home with my family. Because my mom just says things, and unless I'm always like, well, how do you know that? She's like, I don't know, I just think. And then I walk away, and by that I mean I drive back to Iowa, right? Or you have conversations with friends, or especially people who you aren't necessarily friends with, and they just keep saying, this is my side, this is my side, this is my side. They're not, and they're so close-minded. Okay? Now, this is not, this is a trait to have. To be able to look at both sides and say, I think that this is the side that is the most convincing. It's not about Pluto. It has 0 to do with Pluto. Well, it has like 2% to do with Pluto, okay? We're talking about how Pluto's, the idea of and the classification of Pluto has changed. We're putting that into this space thing, but this is just a trait that you need to be able to do as human beings. It's to say, all right, let me look at everything. Let me make a decision on which one is the most convincing. Let me present this in a way where I say, hey, you disagree with me. I understand that, but this is why I think you're wrong, and here's the proof that I have. Instead of just, this is what I think, this is what I think, this is what I think. And that's what that's what we're working on a little bit, okay? This is a theme that we've seen in the last few units. This whole, like, we've got new ideas, and our ideas change, and we have to back it up with evidence. Are you starting to see that, like, all right, I get it? Because you're going to see it in every unit, okay? Every unit is going to have that claim, evidence, and reasoning, because in a couple of years, you're going to make really big decisions, not decisions about what you should call Pluto, okay? So that's what we're going to do. If you look at it, I need you to look at both sides. This is important. If I look at yours and you turn this in, and this is completely filled out, and there's nothing or one thing here, you didn't look at both sides, okay? And I'm not saying that you need to agree, but you need to collect information for why both sides have their arguments. Because in your reasoning, you're going to have to say, all right, I understand, Alexander, that you think it should be a planet, right? Here's why you think it should be a planet, but I think it's a dwarf planet. Here's my evidence, and I'm going to talk about why the other side is not correct. You need to mention that other side. And not necessarily say, you're an idiot for thinking this. You can think that, but you just can't say it or type it. But you're going to say, in a scientific, mature way, this is how I'm going to refute your side. This is why my side holds more weight. So they're going to mention a lot of these. They'll talk about a little bit of the background and why people hate Neil deGrasse Tyson, and then they're going to go right into like all these old dudes are sitting around on the football field. When that happens, that's where they'll start to rapid fire some of your evidence out, and that's where you'll really want to pay attention. If you need me to stop it, one class has said, whoa, can you go back so I can write that down? That's totally fine. It's not very long, okay? After that, there's a couple of resources that I think would be beneficial for you to look at, and we're going to maybe look at some of the things that they say and investigate that a little bit further. Okay, so today's our starting evidence day. Tomorrow we'll finish evidence and you'll probably finish your claim. And then Thursday we'll put it all together and we'll hand it in. All right, any questions about what you're doing right now? Yep.
It's a question about like after like you put all this in, would we be able to like make a slide out of it?
Nope. Good question. The next page will be all your stuff that you need to put in. So it'll be very similar to Bruno. We'll plug that stuff in, but we're not worried about that yet. Okay, so we're gonna watch Neil deGrasse Tyson, just the first so and so minutes of it.
If we
I'm gonna get big.
In 1930, a farm boy with a passion for the universe notices a tiny dot moving across the night sky. He discovers Pluto, 4 billion miles from the sun and cloaked in darkness. Pluto is a mystery. Our best images are nothing more than a blur. And many scientists are arguing over whether it's even a planet.
When we fly our spaceship to Pluto, we will arrive at a round world. I'm able to use the word world, if you like.
The scientific debate over Pluto has even caused a media frenzy.
I'm sorry, I thought planets might be one of the constants in life.
Pluto lovers of America have taken to the streets. What is Pluto? A new mission to the far reaches of the solar system promises to answer this question and more.
It's true first-time exploration. Pluto is going to be completely revealed in all of its glory.
Join me, Neil deGrasse Tyson, on a journey to explore America's favorite planet. And find out why some people are blaming Pluto's problems on me.
So how do you feel about Pluto, Dr. Tyson?
These are the Pluto Files. Next on Nova.
Major funding for NOVA is provided by the following.
For more than 75 years, the great stage of our solar system had a familiar cast of characters. 9 players in all. We even memorized their names. Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, the rocky planets. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, those gas giants. And all the way out to the very edge of our solar system, perhaps the most popular player of all, a lonely little misfit, planet Pluto. But recently, Pluto lost its starring role. And some folks are blaming that on me. I, Neil deGrasse Tyson, director of the Hayden Planetarium in New York City, have been accused of being a Pluto hater. Back in 2000, when my colleagues and I were designing this place, instead of exhibiting Pluto here with planets like Earth and Mars, or up there with giants like Jupiter and Saturn, we decided to boldly go where no planetarium had gone before, and put Pluto far, far away, all the way downstairs, with a group of newly discovered icy objects in the outer solar system. If you look hard enough, you can find it right here. Little did I know how much this decision would change my life. My troubles began with the astute observation of one young visitor.
I can't find Pluto.
who, just my luck, was overheard by an off-duty journalist from the New York Times. He decides this is a great story, so he calls his Times colleague, science writer Kenneth Chang, and he's shocked.
Well, I was looking for Pluto, I couldn't find it. And you look everywhere, you see 8 planets, not 9.
A few days later, Chang's story hits the front page, right beneath George W.'s inauguration. The headline reads, "Pluto is not a planet? Only in New York." I received angry emails and tons of letters, especially from pissed off third graders.
Dear Natural History Museum, Pluto is my favorite planet. Why can't Pluto be a planet? Please write back, but not in cursive because I can't read in cursive.
I thought, oh my gosh, kids will probably go to this exhibit and cry because Pluto's no longer a planet.
Could it be the final indignity for the farthest and smallest planet in our solar system?
Our exhibit had stirred up a media frenzy.
Pluto was, since 1930, a planet. He had stature, he had friends. You come along and say,
Neil deGrasse Tyson, you have left a void in the universe as big as Pluto.
I never wanted to kick Pluto out of the solar system. I just wanted to group it with its icy brethren.
You saying Pluto should be with its own kind, separate but equal?
Yeah, I guess that comes out that way, doesn't it?
Neil deGrasse Tyson has betrayed us.
He has thrown his weight around a little bit too much. He's not the boss of the solar system. He's not the boss of me.
If Neptune or Mercury had been reclassified, I don't think anybody would have cared. But the fact that it happened to Pluto seems to make all the difference. Pluto has a remarkable grip on the hearts and minds of the American public and the press. Even my colleagues in astrophysics are still arguing over what to do with Pluto, and I don't really know why. But I'm determined to find out. This is the story of my journey. These are the Pluto Files. My first stop took me to Cambridge, Massachusetts. A visit to the hallowed halls of Harvard just might help me make sense of this Pluto problem. Welcome to the Harvard University football field. I brought a few props along with me, much to the surprise of my colleagues. Astrophysicist Brian Marsden doesn't think Pluto is a planet, while planetary scientist Mark Sykes thinks it definitely is. And the esteemed historian of science, Owen Gingerich, is looking for the middle ground.
Okay, Neil, what are we doing here?
We're making a scale model of the solar system right here on this playing field.
Okay.
So grab one of these, and let's do it. To evaluate Pluto's planetary status, we need to take a closer look at how it compares with the heavy hitters on the solar system team. The planets are millions, even billions of miles apart. So this scale model can't accurately depict their distance from one another, but it can show their relative size. If this 8-foot balloon represents our sun, how does Pluto size up against the rest of the team? Let's find out. Mark, first up, Mercury. Mercury, represented by a bead, in correct size relative to the sun. Here we go. Minuscule Mercury may be small, but its diameter is still twice as big as puny Pluto's. Next up, Venus. You'll have the honor.
Thank you, thank you.
Venus, represented by this tiny rubber ball, has a diameter 5 times as big as Pluto. Earth. Earth, the big blue marble, is 6 times as wide as Pluto. Earth and Venus are about 1 inch. Mars would be about 1/2 inch, one of the sizes of these gumdrops relative to the sun. But it still trounces Pluto 3-1.
Jupiter.
Jupiter.
King of the planets.
King of the planets, you have the honor.
There you go.
The largest planet, King Jupiter, represented by a schoolyard kickball, is a whopping 62 times as wide as Pipsqueak Pluto.
Saturn, the size of a bowling ball is relative to the sun.
Pluto doesn't fare much better against my favorite planet, Saturn, or its next door neighbor.
Uranus, represented by a bocce ball. You ever played bocce?
I've never played bocce.
Neither have I.
It would take 22 Plutos on a chain to equal the diameter of one Uranus.
Croquet, anyone? What do you have now? Neptune, what do you have in the honors?
Big blue Neptune is 21 times as wide as Pluto.
Last and least,
And not least,
we have Pluto, represented by a ball bearing removed from a roller skate.
sometimes the most valuable things are in the smallest packages. There you go. Excellent.
Pluto's diameter is just under 1,500 miles. In fact, if it ever decided to visit America, it would stretch only from California to Kansas. No matter how you look at it, Pluto makes a scrawny little planet.
Pluto's really puny, right? But so is Mercury.
Well, Pluto's a lot punier.
Not punier.
1/20th the mass of Mercury.
Mercury, that's
less than the mass of the moon.
Touchdown right there. Okay.
If we were to keep score of Pluto's oddball traits versus its planet-like characteristics, how would it add up? Brian thinks Pluto's puny size disqualifies it from the planet team. So he gives one touchdown and of course the extra point to Pluto the oddball.
This is ridiculous. You know, not ridiculous. No.
Mark disagrees. For him, size is less important than shape. Pluto, like every player on our planet team, is round and not potato-shaped like nearly all asteroids. This sequence of images taken by the Hubble Space Telescope shows Pluto as a sphere with a textured surface.
When we fly our spaceship to Pluto, we will arrive at a round world that has an atmosphere, that has bright and dark areas on the surface, and it will look much more like objects we call planets than these little irregular inert objects that we call asteroids.
So, roundness, you give it a full touchdown.
Yeah.
2 touchdowns.
2 touchdowns. But then again, we all know Pluto's got this really weird orbit. First of all, it's tipped. The most tipped orbit. What's that worth, David?
Not too much.
Not too much. Field goal. Not quite a touchdown.
Right, yeah, that isn't really the problem. I think the problem was crossing the orbit of Neptune.
Pluto's orbit isn't just tipped, it's highly elliptical, not nearly circular like other planets, which actually forces Pluto to cross the orbit of another planet.
That's bad.
That is really bad.
Nobody else does that. There you go. Touchdown right there.
Another 7 points for the oddball team.
One way you might define a planet is that it ought to have a moon, but of course Mercury and Venus don't have moons.
And guess what? Tiny little Pluto does. In fact, it has 3. One of those moons, Charon, is so large compared with Pluto that they both orbit a point in space in between them. Which might make you wonder, which one is the planet?
The idea of planets orbiting planets isn't really so foreign. We see many double stars out there, and we see galaxies orbiting galaxies.
The solar system is such a complicated place. It's very important to understand there is this richness out there.
So Brian, if we go there, we find that Pluto has mountains or craters or an atmosphere. It's got world properties that match other objects we're happy to call planets.
I'm able to use the word world, if you like, but planet.
So then, what is Pluto?
So that's where we're going to stop with the
4
video.
billion miles from the sun. Our best images of Pluto and its moons are
So they talked about a lot of stuff there. Talked about, they didn't go into detail of the certain, They didn't go into a ton of detail about the specific criteria that it has to meet to be a planet, but they did talk about some of the other characteristics. Now, what you're going to start looking at is what exactly is that criteria, okay? How important do you think, and they made really good points, hey, it has this and it has this, but I think that this is the most important thing, right? So they weighted them differently. It's not necessarily a list of how many pros and cons there are, but how important those are. So you've got a little bit of a start. You got a couple of things there. There's some resources that are listed right above those columns for you. You don't have to use those. I literally just typed in something into Google and I grabbed a couple of the articles, but if you want to search on your own and make a decision about which websites that you want to use, you can do that. I would love for you to get as much information as you possibly can today. All right, we still have about 20 minutes left, 15-ish minutes left. 20 minutes left. And you could get a ton of information. If you get a bunch of evidence done, you have 10 more minutes than other classes do. Most other classes only have about 10 minutes today, okay? So we're gonna get into looking at the evidence. There's one, I'm gonna tell you right off the bat, there's one criteria that every class has asked me about today, and it talks about, it's the one that Pluto does not do. So the criteria for being a planet that Pluto does not meet, people are confused about it. I'm gonna talk about that as a class at the beginning of class tomorrow, all right? So I've gotten a lot of individual questions. I'm just gonna address it as a class, but I wanna make sure that everybody's had a chance to go look up what it is before I address that. So I will do that tomorrow. Today's gonna be our research day, so if we wanna get up and move around. It's been weirdly silent in here, but classes have also been incredibly productive. Okay, so work really hard, and I think that it's gonna end up helping. So I'll walk around, see where we're at. If you've got any questions for me, feel free to let me know. We are looking for both sides of it. All right, so you might need to type that in if you want to. If you watch a video, please use your headphones. Other than that, 15 or so minutes to get as much of that evidence as we possibly can.
I have a question. Can I go back to my teacher because they don't have headphones? And to work on it there.
Sure. Anything else? All right. Oh, I have the table of contents. Who didn't get them? A bunch of people? All right, I'll hand them out to you.
I already got one.
Did we enter that? Did you finish this one? There are like 2 questions on Canvas that we answered on the back. And some of them are